Call to order this special meeting of the Bellflower City Council. It's Tuesday, April 6th, 2021 at 10:06 in the morning. Before we begin, please note that all public meetings will be recorded. When a participant logs in via their computer or calls in to join the meeting, their name and/or phone number will be visible to all participants. Unless you are providing public comment, your audio will be muted and your video will be disabled. Persons wishing to be audience members to the meeting may do so anonymously. Anonymous participants, however, will not be recognized for public comment. Persons who seek to bypass the city's host controls will be dropped and blocked from the meeting. Thank you for cooperation. Madam City Clerk, roll call, please.
Member Sanchez.
Here.
Councilmember Santinas.
Here.
Tim Denton.
Here. I could hardly hear you.
Councilmember Hamada.
Here.
Coops.
Here. So let the record show that all members of the City Council are present. Public comments, Mr. Stewart.
Pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.3A, the public may address the City Council on matters listed on the agenda. Those wishing to speak on an agenda item must utilize one of the methods listed on page 2 of the agenda. You will be given 3 minutes to address the City Council. Attempts to provide comment at times not designated on the agenda may result in the city dropping you from the meeting.
If you'd like to speak, please use the raised hand feature. If by computer, it appears under the Participants tab. If by phone app, it will appear under the More button at the bottom right-hand corner. Or if by telephone, press the number 9 to raise your hand. You will be called upon in the order received. You can then unmute your microphone so that you can provide your comments. Do we have any public comments this morning?
Mayor, I'll give the public a moment to utilize the feature.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'm not seeing any raised hands at this time.
Thank you very much. Item 4A. Travis, do you have the report on that?
Yes, I do. I can go ahead and get started.
Please proceed.
Okay, so good morning, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Thank you for meeting this morning. I just wanted to give you some background on this item. So staff released an RFP for a wireless network implementation plan back in July of 2019 in order to explore options to implement and deploy a wireless network in the city to help close the digital divide and provide wireless internet access to unconnected citizens and businesses in the community. So we ended up receiving 2 proposals and selected ICC Networking, also known as ICCN, who offered a minimal cost wireless network program with a digital advertising revenue sharing component. And this project was placed on hold due to the pandemic. However, ICCN recently received interest from a new stakeholder that is willing to fund all upfront costs for the design, equipment, deployment, and installation of a citywide wireless network program in the city, while also sharing the digital advertising revenue with the city. So with that, Keith Alexis from ICCN is on the call and will be providing a brief presentation on their proposed wireless network. And based on the following presentation, staff is recommending to direct the city manager to negotiate the terms of an agreement with ICCN to design, install, and deploy a citywide wireless network with a revenue sharing component, or alternatively discuss and take other action related to this item. So Keith, the floor is yours. And then Madam City Clerk, can you please allow Keith to share his screen?
Great, thank you very much, Travis. Honorable Mayor and also members of the City Council. I do definitely appreciate everyone's time today and look forward to going through a very brief overview of the proposal that we originally submitted, as well as some additional information that we've recently added to it. ICC networking as a brief overview. We will be presenting 3 sections to our presentation. One is what we call the gap, bridging that digital divide. Second, improvement actions that we feel we can assist with in helping the city bridge its digital divide. And then, of course, results in different areas that we have seen in our business model. Now, one of the things from a company corporate standpoint, ICCN has been around for over 10 years. The founders, as well as the board of directors, are experienced, what we call original manufacturers, and we have been working with everyone from LG Ericsson to developing solutions for Cisco, IBM. We were part of the fastest supercomputer in the world in 2006, aside from working with individual countries in the developing world as well. We are a global company with locations in every region of the world, and we operate with the military. We just did a deployment for the U.S. Special Operations in Raqqa, Syria, across that city also. And so our objective here is how then do we bridge the digital divide, the gap. And so we created a program called Greater Access and Performance. That program is based on sort of 3 factors that we see as central components to the issues dealing with the digital divide, not just in Bellflower, but everywhere at the end of the day. And so those 3 issues are internet connectivity, device availability, and then network sustainability over the long haul. And so, excuse me, so when we look at, and I'm sure you are all aware of these numbers, over the last year, as the California Department of Education, there was a need for almost 500,000 devices in homes. So we also hope to help bridge that divide with the city's assistance and approval in this program as we continue through. So our offer, and when we won the original RFP over our competitor, is an offer to help the city of Bellflower with a different option to connect more citizens than has traditionally been connected. And in order to do that, we take a hybrid approach. We take not just a public-private approach, we also take an approach with our technology that allows us to, one, develop a pipeline and monetize our business model, right, for service delivery to low-income neighborhoods, prioritizing families with school-aged children, and then we expand that into other parts of the economy. The second part is enhancing the capability of the community anchor institutions such as libraries, neighborhood nonprofits. We work closely with churches and other organizations to expand the digital footprint of a city. And then we also enlist a wide range of stakeholders within that city, whether or not that is the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Corporation, as well as universities and other third parties that may have the same interests that align with the city's objective to bridge that divide. And then also by expanding that general capacity, we've brought to market in certain neighborhoods specific technology like Bluetooth that help connect the homeless populations, that then direct them to push information that helps to direct them to where resources may be, providing secondary sources of information that can be had by individuals. Now, how do we do that, right? Because it's very expensive, as I'm sure you all know. What's happened in the industry is that, so one, we deliver infrastructure, technology, right? Our own branded, manufactured, high-end military spec solutions. We also deliver what's called last mile. That means, that last piece that gets into the home to the end user. And we have various technologies to do that, as well as content and over-the-top delivery. Content delivery would be things like e-learning and other capabilities, and then over-the-top capabilities. What the traditional market segments have historically done is that money typically flows from your community into the coffers of ad machines at the end of the day. And with the advent, and in particularly the growth in stay at home, what we've seen is the digital economy continuing to grow. So we've all heard of places like you go to the airport and there's Boingo and they do a lot of ad-based networking. You never really see it, but they're making $500 million a year in revenue from that. Or you hear about Facebook or Google and the billions of dollars they're making. It's the same business model that's being used, but it's being used here from the standpoint of inserting ourselves with our technology to then be able to give back to the community at the end of the day. So how does that work? Before we get into physical pieces, we'll go through how it works, what the cost is to us and our funding partner, and then what the expected return on that cost is and what we can then share once that cost is taken care of with the city as well. So the nothing is free, right? There's always there is a charge. Someone is paying for the infrastructure. And what typically happens in this environment is that with digital marketing, these are the kinds of companies that wind up growing. So it's from, you can see Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, and all of these others. They have grown quite significantly by allowing access to their platforms from your constituents. And you're getting nothing out of that. Your constituents are getting nothing out of that. And the return on investment happens at the service provider level. What we do because of our relationships, as a matter of fact, interestingly enough, our first 6 years, we OEM'd our technology to AT&T. It was a branded product. They took it into All Nippon Airways and Tesla and a number of other places. So we have very good service provider relationships. So we've inserted ourselves into that revenue stream, allowing us to then enable a certain portion of that percentage to go now flow back into the community and fund a lot of these infrastructure projects, fund a lot of the affordable housing projects. We actually just won Link Housing for 40 MDUs, where we are donating laptops back, so they have now computer rooms in the MDUs, and so we work with a variety of types of organizations to be able to physically do that, because the dollar amounts that are flowing from these digital ad revenues is quite significant. On the city side, what we're expecting and hoping for is city partnership, not favoritism, but partnership in the sense that we're able to connect through the city with, the Chamber of Commerce, be able to help advertise out and understand and get more users on that network. So that way, the more users that are on the network, the more revenue is generated and the more is able to then expand that network as well. So as opposed to a subscription model, it is a performance model, forcing us to make sure that the networks perform and that they stay performing, because that's the core of how the ad revenue is made. So we put skin in the game. We are there for the long haul. And so as a result, there is a significant amount of accountability placed on ourselves, our partners, the installers, to make sure things are done correctly, or on our side, we don't get paid. There's no revenue to pay for the network, or if it's a crappy network at the end of the day, not enough people are on to justify the network from the investor perspective. And when we come to the investor, we work with a number of different groups. On the international basis, we work with everyone from the International Development Bank to local basis to local sponsors. In this case, we're working with a local utility company that's looking to deploy and expand social networks. And what we're proposing, we have proposed to the Economic Development Group, is to do first of all, we believe in trust but verify. So we would do a proof of concept and validate what we're able to do, and validate the numbers that we are seeing. That proof of concept would be paid for by the investors, and we're targeting 15% of the population to be able to connect to that network. So this would be, and I'll show you on the next map, different areas of the city that we would start off with and make sure that those areas are properly covered. And in most of those areas, we don't necessarily have to, because I know the city of Bellflower, having had a very good relationship over the years, understands, and having met with the Public Works group, you may not necessarily own a lot of your poles, city poles. So we don't necessarily need a lot of city poles. What we need are local small businesses, churches, nonprofits, where we do have a city infrastructure like a library. So we use those as lily pads, as points where we can jump off of into the community in order to connect the community. And so we seek things like marketing efforts, like optional city support for in-resident devices. So we have small MiFi devices that we can give to students or underprivileged kids, so that they have connectivity as well within their home, not just simply in common areas also. And then also seeking over the long haul to make sure that this is also sustainable. We at minimum look at a 10-year supported network. And so we're not talking about refreshing or every 3 years and someone has to pay for a lease or something of the sort. We're looking at this as a long-term sustainable relationship that can, again, have a real impact, not just to the top line, but also most importantly, the bottom line as well. We also have the ability to, once we get going and the investor has paid off for the original investment, where we're looking at sharing those dollars back with the city. And that, at the end of the day, can be anywhere from 10 to 15, 20%. We have to sort of see where the monthly ad revenue projections wind up, because it can be more or less at the end of the day based on performance. And what you're seeing in the Excel spreadsheet here, and we share this presentation with the team, are the different phases, and the phases themselves represent different parts of your city that we felt, it can change, but would take a certain amount of time to deploy. We've already gone through and done a site survey to understand, what, where, and how, and what that potential cost could be, how long it would take to roll that out. And then, of course, we ran the numbers based on what we think the estimated monthly ad revenue would be in that one particular section. And so the ad revenue then pays back the investor. So then the city does not have to come out of pocket to pay for the environment. But what we are asking from the city is that level of partnership to make sure that we ease the liability from an install standpoint, from getting the word out as well. The other thing that we're looking at, when we look at it from an engagement perspective, how do we do that? Where do we do that? We have, as we said, we have a number of different types of technology. And what you're seeing here, we'll start off on the far right-hand side is a map of the city, and there are numbers on that map, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so these are deployment map areas, right, where we've already done a certain level of a site survey. So in area 1, which is obviously is the Bellflower Boulevard area, where we feel we could accomplish fairly easily a proof of concept to demonstrate to this group that this is not only a viable alternative and option, but is complementary. So we're not looking at replacing existing service providers or competing with existing service providers. We feel that the digital divide is big enough that, and not being addressed well enough, that there would definitely be interest in our kind of network. And then in the lower left-hand corner where you see 2 and 3, based on the low and moderate income areas, we felt that based on how this laid out with our modeling, those would be the next areas as far as phases were concerned. And then phase 4, 5, and 6 would then be rolled out over a period of time. We would also use a couple of different technologies, and we don't necessarily need to go into a lot of alphabet soup talk, but everyone's familiar with Wi-Fi. There's another technology that has just been allowed by the FCC called citizen band radio signal. And that is a special signal that allows us to come in and cover a larger area. And so as a result, we can put a personal device in someone's home, like a MiFi device that you would get typically from like a Verizon or AT&T, and capture that signal and bring it into the home so that student or that stay-at-home mom or that family can have connectivity. We also have different types of those devices to make it easier around the city to collect a signal and connect individuals as well. And so by being able to do that, what does that look like? From a performance perspective, we would obviously start off with the target of meeting the FCC requirements, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the 25 down, 3 up requirements that's currently suggested as the definition of broadband by the FCC. They may change that and increase it, but today the goal is how do we get every city and every underconnected community up to at least that standard, and then our network can go beyond that as well. Built into the network is the capability for future standards. So our CBRS technology has the ability, because it is cellular technology. It can eventually get to a point where it supports 5G capability in the future as well. So the goal, again, is to connect residents, small businesses, public areas, and while at the same time leveraging existing or new broadband sources such as schools. We can bring schools into the program, which is vital. Schools obviously have their own setup, but if they're not using their broadband at night, we can then connect students in the evening so that they're able to get online. And then obviously we could shut down that usage during the day. So a lot of different flexible options to make sure we expand and connect into different communities effectively, efficiently, and above all, at the lowest possible cost so that it's sustainable. The next level that we would also do is then there are other kinds of devices as we talked about that would then be deployed. And these devices, the reason these are here, we're sort of showing you how small these devices are, right? They're not, sort of these, you have a very beautiful city. And so these are not devices that would, detract from the beauty of the city. And some of these devices actually can be camouflaged. So you can have a different color that matches in with the side of a building to make sure that that it doesn't detract from the building facility itself as well. And having said that, because we're using multiple technologies, it increases now the flexibility and sustainability over the long haul for multiple ways of gaining access. And where would these things go? Well, there are a lot of different areas. As I said, we've already taken a look at different environments within the city during our site survey. We don't need to necessarily be on poles, but we could be on the side of buildings. We can be in restaurants where we get the signal that then spills out into any of the main roadway areas. We want to be as interactive as possible, so we do want small businesses involved in the program, and so as a result, we get most of the community involved in the actual process as well. The other thing is that, during that proof of concept, right, we'll select specific areas, we'll explain the infrastructure. Like I said, we've met with the public works teams. We've shown them and brought in samples of the mounting kits and the mounting gear so that they can actually physically see how large these things are. And as you can see, they're not very large at all. And so connecting these devices and connecting into the community infrastructure or with net new infrastructure is non-intrusive at the end of the day, making sure that network is managed. The other thing that we also deliver is a fully managed NOC environment. And what that simply means is that it's a centralized location where all devices are managed and connectivity points are managed, along with the technical support. So if someone is at home and they're struggling to get connection, they have a no cost call center that they can call into. It's a US based call center. We use a lot of technical folks that are at home. So our goal is also to then develop a program where locally we have local technicians that can actually take that phone call, develop a local cottage industry there as well. And that's the important part. So in closing things out, again, we want to make sure that everyone sort of understands that there is, even though what we're offering and bringing to the city is a very large asset, it's not free. We do have an investor that has to be paid back. But they allow us to get off the ground with a lot of these projects, and then the advertising and local businesses and organizations, we all sort of get together to make sure that there is success. Clearly, it matters, as you all know, from bridging the digital divide standpoint, so I don't need to sort of belabor that. But the one last point that I'd like to make is the fact that off of this one network, the future expansion over the next 10 years, we are looking at expanding this network quite significantly. So it's not about getting in and getting subscribers. It's about how then do we create an environment that then grows over time, over that 10 to 15 year. How do we ensure our Warp data center solution gets included so that there's a data center within the city of Bellflower itself? How do we then create these high-speed capabilities so that businesses, small businesses, medium businesses, industrial, have the ability to access higher speed data in attracting more larger, more complex business environments, and then also smart grid, smart home kinds of ecosystems. You can't have a smart home if you're not connected. But then what do you do with that in the long run as well? In other places, we've created specialty programs, like I mentioned, the homeless program before. We've also worked with a company called Vista Life Sciences. We were introduced to them via Microsoft. Their telehealth solution helps now clinics reduce clinic overcrowding by having healthcare capabilities that can be delivered at home. And again, connectivity is the first part of that, and then what do you do with it is the second part of that as well. And the important thing about Vista Life Sciences, they're the ones that provide the telehealth capabilities for NASA's space station as well. So these are substantial entities. So as I mentioned before, in summary, we're looking to shift the business model, and we're hoping everyone sort of understood what we were saying, because we feel that while efforts have been really, really Herculean, that the task is so large that it can very well require multiple ways for us to actually solve the problem, increasing the infrastructure to enable more access online, while at the same time increasing local engagement to create an ecosystem for sustainable connectivity over time. It becomes central. And then, of course, involving more stakeholders in the long term, private, public, become important. So from a next steps perspective, obviously working closely with this group, making sure that we are able to get to the next level, get the contract in place. And then from a timeline perspective, we hope to have an official launch in the June timeframe, if not sooner, based on expectations. And I think I speak for our whole company as its primary founder. We do definitely appreciate everyone's time today. And please, and any questions that anyone may have.
Well, thank you for that complete report. I really appreciate your coming out and making a better presentation that we were first offered.
Thank you. What's the estimated ad revenue you're going to get from the secondary sponsors on this? Do you anticipate?
So the ad revenue that we're anticipating initially, we assume that, let me talk about the assumptions first, that out of the 75 to 80,000 population, we're assuming that there's going to be a 10 to 15% adoption rate to the network. So we're looking at roughly between 8 to 12,000 people using the system on a monthly basis. From that, we are expecting the ad revenue to range between $37,000 and $50,000 on a monthly basis. We also have on top of that, if we're able to get larger sponsors, like in some areas, like in Cobb County, we were in discussions with McDonald's, for example, where it was less expensive for them to do this kind of advertising, and so they were proposing $350,000 on an annual basis to be included in our process. So the standard advertising we're expecting is between 37 and 50,000. Sometimes there are national advertising that we can also bring in as well.
Does that include does your price include the connectivity for the end users in the community?
Yes, that is
Okay.
that is correct. And what we're looking to do with that is to get donor help in that, right? Maybe even city help. So the device that goes into the resident is about a $200 device. We know that on our side we can definitely commit to 50% of that. And so what we're looking at are specific donors, city assistance, other things to bridge that last $100.
Okay. What's the term of agreement you're looking at roughly for the first one?
The first one, we're looking at a minimum of 5 years with a renewal for another 5 years. So a total term of 10 years.
Got it.
Any other questions, Jeff?
No, I'm good.
Jeff has been mentioned. I'll do what he presented as the potential for our income stream. What is that in dollars? What is a percentage?
So, yeah, I'm looking. I didn't do the math. Do you have the numbers in dollars? You're like $37,000 to $50,000 a month times
What's our
12
percentage?
times 10. So you're going to recover your costs. Obviously, there's time, cost of money, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something I haven't run through yet and run with calculation, or if I try to calculate what the cost of helping you with the end user connectivity is yet either. So these are things that all need to be discussed. Yeah, I can see this being an interesting discussion on the agreement. So. All right.
Yep, and we can provide a spreadsheet showing not only the assumptions but also the recurring revenue on the city side of things. One thing we have been working on, and it's something I think during the contractual discussion is a minimum threshold that that us and our partners would say, okay, regardless of what happens, we will guarantee the city, let's just say 10,000 every single month, right? As far as a recurring revenue. And so that may get higher, that may get lower, but at the end of the day, our commitment back to the city is at this level. And the reason why we feel we can do that is that the goal is to get more people on. So if the city's working with us, we're everywhere we've been. So you take the city of Bastrop, Texas, right? It's much smaller, right? 10,000, 12,000 population. But we see there on average 40% of the total population being online on a monthly basis now that it's physically, all rolled out. So we're actually expecting a higher number of people than the 10 to 20% to be on the network in reality. But we can provide the details.
Well, that's interesting. So you indicated you expected the connectivity rate in this city to be about roughly 15% on your network.
Right.
Travis, what is the connectivity rate now without any public network?
I'm not sure if we have that. Jim, do you have that available?
No, it's probably pretty low unless it's subscribers,
But we don't know.
people that are
So-
subscribed. Yeah.
That's fine. So we don't know. All right. So how do you figure that you're going to come to a 15% connectivity rate? Do you just have the data for that? That's the average usage?
Right, exactly. And those are specific use, and we'll provide that. But we use those numbers based on the networks we have deployed. The national averages are actually higher. The national averages are more in the 25 to 30% ranges for the sort of your open hotspot kind of network. So if you go to like a Starbucks or you're at the airport and so forth, airports are actually much higher because it's a captive audience at the end of the day.
Okay. So, and to answer your question, Mr. Coops, it looks like you're looking at about $6 million in total revenue realized on this project over the course of a 10-year agreement, roughly, and the share back of about $600,000 to the city if you're looking at the
Over the
revenue
long
sharing
period.
on that for the long period.
So what I'm looking at is that if we have, I believe our population to be about 80,000.
Yeah.
And we're looking at 15% of that as being the potential that would participate. And so if there are 13,000 households that need a box of $200 each, and the expectation is that we support this half, which is $100.
I was running the numbers.
All right, so we're gonna need, the first $130,000 is gonna be to put the hardware in. Am I getting this right?
No, you're right. And so, I mean, again, it's going to be an interesting negotiation because my view, of course, is I don't want money coming out of pocket on this. I'd rather suspend ad revenue for the first year to offset the cost of connectivity, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm going to need to see some more data too before I sit down and discuss the contract with these guys as far as the assumptions on revenues and the connectivity rate of the city now and the bang for the buck, so to speak.
Mr.
So-
City Manager, this is
Yeah.
Jim. One of the things that we've talked about internally is because these boxes for homes are done typically in the low and moderate income neighborhoods and low and moderate income families, we can use our CDBG COVID funds to help implement those. And
No, I
then it would be
understand.
non-general fund.
No, I understand. I'm actually much more concerned about the flooding of ads into these homes with the connectivity here. That's my bigger concern for the moment. But well, these are all points of discussion. We'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, and just so that everyone is on the same page as well. These are not ads that are flooded in, right? These are, if you go to CNN.com or FoxNews.com or anywhere else, or or Facebook, right? So there are no pop-ups or anything. Basically, what it is, it's having a most important thing is having a dedicated network ecosystem, right? Where, because these guys, the digital advertisers, simply they're looking at it from a device perspective, eyeballs at the end of the day, and then those ads are piped into the same framework as anywhere else. Correct.
Oh, I see. I understand.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna need a little more detail on that, but I thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right, I'm gonna open it up to council questions. So Mayor Pro Tem Ray Dutton, have you any questions about what was presented?
It's on mute.
All right, we're ready for you, Ray.
Mr. Dutton, you're still on mute.
There we go. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. More of the hardware type questions. The distance between some of these, I'm thinking they're antennas, for lack of better terms, or whatever. Would the distance be like, say, 300 feet apart? I know you showed a chart with some ranges on it downtown. How often do you need one of these? Say the one that goes on the telephone pole, the one was 24 inches tall.
Yep.
And then a follow-up question to that would be, are these all going to be run with new cable from pole to pole to pole, or are we going to use subcontracting with something that's already there, like our cable company for TV, or Verizon, which is our carrier through the telephone poles now for internet? Some of these houses are already wired for internet, and so do we cable the whole town to run your cables to all this equipment, or do we piggyback on an existing infrastructure?
Yep. No, that's an excellent question. So how we accomplish this is during our site survey, we actually do two things. One, we look at it exactly like what you're saying. How can we have the least amount of impact on the existing infrastructure? So yes, we do partner with other entities such as utilities, service providers that already have infrastructure in the area, whether or not that is a branded service provider like a Comcast or an AT&T or Verizon or whomever is in the area, or Crown Castle. This depends on the infrastructure that's needed, but I would say about 80% of our deployments are actually wireless. And so when we look at the technology that's being used in some areas, yes, you'll need what's called 802.11 Wi-Fi technology, like maybe a ballpark or common area or something. But a lot of our deployments are in this what's called the CBRS, which is a slice of the cellular or LTE world. And that allows us now with these smaller devices to get into the home over a wireless connection. And that's a very important part, because then it means that we're not running a cable to someone's house. It's a MiFi device. It's a high-powered router that they sit close to the window, and then it provides Wi-Fi within the facility so that they can then connect via Wi-Fi and then out of their facility via LTE technology.
Like similar, like a repeater or an amplifier.
And there you go. Exactly. And we only have a few, a CBRS antenna can sit at City Hall. It could sit at a couple different places throughout the city. And that's really the main infrastructure hub, throwing its own signal out into the community and then having these devices throughout the community as well.
Got it. And where I'm getting my what's in my head, because I have an acre facility with Wi-Fi on it, and it's all through the buildings and whatnot.
Yep.
So that requires, some of this equipment requires AC power. So some of this stuff that would be on these poles or buildings would have to be plugged into AC outlets.
Some will be, but a lot of ours also, we do both AC and DC, and we even do solar systems that go along with them. We also have a partnership with a military spec retractable tower company. And so if we needed to, say, at a church, for example, put up a tower that's 4x4, that's simply 10, 20 feet tall or something based on city approval, we can definitely do that if necessary.
Got it. So some of the DC locations would be batteries with the solar array to keep them charged, and then the equipment would run off the battery system.
There you go.
An inverter.
Exactly. Exactly correct. Exactly correct.
Hey, Keith, could you also explain how your partnerships with various businesses in the community, where you offer the free Wi-Fi in exchange for the install on the buildings and the use of their power?
Absolutely, it's a good point. And so we are very much so interested in helping the local economy, right? Which is why we want to partner with the Chamber of Commerce and obviously the EDC. And so part of the marketing group that comes in, they go to the local businesses, they offer them a free access point to be put inside their facility in exchange for putting a device that then projects outside of their facility and allowing us to connect with wireless. So as a result, we don't have to use a lot, along a particular street. If you get 3 or 4 of these organizations that then allow businesses that allow us that level of flexibility, we then are able to cover a greater section without any additional infrastructure or engagement or permits or anything like that from the city. And the business now gets the opportunity in the ad modeling to have their business put on the ad system, where they're no longer, on the 10th page of a Google search, right? They, a lot of them aren't going to know what SEO is, et cetera, right? So instead of having 15 Pizza Huts and Subways, now you've got, Mom's Pizza Shop or that's listed higher up in that geolocation at the end of the day.
Got it. One more question. Is I every time I'm at an airport and get on the Wi-Fi, it's very, very, very slow. And I'm wondering if it's more of an antiquated system at some of these airports. I've been to campgrounds, the same thing with the Wi-Fi. It's no good. It's not worth it. If you're a high-paced person and you just don't have the time to wait for that stuff between downloads and uploads. And that's not even in the videos.
Right.
So your system, do you guarantee faster or I mean, how do you,
Yeah.
it's because I imagine it's going to be all the same. It's going to be all the same speed.
Yeah, exactly, right. So it is all the same speed. It's not necessarily that it's slower in different areas. Is that they typically, in a subscription model, you model based on what's called subscription rates, and those are based on basically the least cost basis because they're making money based on your membership to them. In our model, we switch that around, right? We don't get paid if the ad doesn't come through. If you have a slow experience, you're not getting on that network, and if you're not on that network, no one is making money. And so instead of deploying like you mentioned, as you so astutely pointed out, do you need an access point every 300 feet? In our scenario, which is why we use CBRS, we're actually over-speccing. So typically we have the ability today to go to not just 25 and 3, we can actually take a single user all the way up to 100 by 25. And so that's already baked into the system. So if, in, let's just say a year, we realize, wow, everyone is clipping at that 25 by 3, we have the ability then through a management system to simply increase the broadband. We'll have to add another centralized device to add more capacity because you have more people doing more. But at the end of the day, that's one device as opposed to redeploying a whole network at the end of the day. So if the performance requirement, it's incumbent upon us to perform or we lose money and the investor loses their shirt at the end of the day.
Fair enough. Thank you. That's all my questions, Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dutton. Councilmember Victor Sanchez, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do actually have a couple of questions. Mr. Dunn covered a few, but I want to touch on the option of the speed options as well. Mr. Keith, if your Wi-Fi was tested, what speed would that come out at? Would it be 100 over, I think now most houses are having 400 megabytes, or is this the 25 over 3? Is that really the speed it would have? Because that would be very slow.
Mm-hmm. So we're engineers, not marketing. And what you are seeing, and I think Mr. Dutton articulated the concerns correctly as well, is that the advertising says one thing, but then the experience is quite a different thing. And the reason for that is that the fact is that there's something in our industry called the theoretical versus the actual speed, right? And so what is being advertised in the marketplace is the theoretical capability. Yes, you can have in a vacuum one device get up to that speed, but it would be the only device on that network at that one particular time, because the assumption is that you will never really have one device. And so the idea that someone is getting that kind of speed is factually correct, but not actually correct at the end of the day. So the average speeds in broadband, that's why everybody complains about broadband. Why is it so slow? Why is it so slow? But yet everyone advertises that everyone's getting these great speeds, is because they're not actually getting those speeds. Now, having said that, what do we do on our networks? Our networks, the reason why we can say you can get X amount of speed is because we designed the network with as big a possible back end to handle the incoming information, the incoming traffic. And why is that? That is because we need that traffic on that network so that that traffic gets monetized. Now, putting a number on it, you really can't, because the other thing that no one mentions is that everyone's device is going to perform differently. So, your Samsung S20 or 21 is going to be at one speed, and the Samsung S6 is going to perform at a different speed. So it's really almost impossible to say everyone is going to get this speed at this level. And then the other thing that also happens is that the further away someone is from a device, right, speed declines. And so someone may be, 100 feet away, but somebody may be 50 feet away. So I really would love to say you're absolutely correct in that. What we try to do is say, okay, at a minimum, it's that 25 and 3, because that 25 and 3 allows for the application, right? The e-learning capability, the telehealth, and these kinds of things that occur. The reason we're looking at increasing the upload speeds is because what's happening, events like this, for example, Zoom is an upload technology from a video, not a download. And so that's why. So I apologize for not answering your question directly.
Well,
But,
okay,
it's a
all
little bit more
provisions,
nuanced.
all provisions and provisos aside, I understand all that. We all do. So roughly based, I'm just in comparison, next to FiOS or the average FiOS or the average cable system, what is the speed of the network going to be for people with an average device? I mean, you can guesstimate what that's going to be. How does it compare? Is it way slower? Is it marginally slower? Is it roughly equivalent? What is it roughly? Because here's what's going to happen is if we install this and it's dog slow, we're going to hear nothing but complaints about it, and it's not going to work. So we probably need a good heads up on what we're going to get coming in. So what's your best guesstimate based on what you know about average speeds?
So the experience people are going to have is going to be the same experience as on a Verizon network. The speed itself is going to be at a 25 and 3.
Are you going to be able to show a demo on that so we can at least say that we went through the hoops of seeing that before just accepting it?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that, Keith. Just to give you an idea, I know in the downtown, and this is from just engaging with several owners and locations in that area, they currently can't get FiOS, so they can't, their download speeds is about 70 megabytes per second. It's incredibly slow. There'd have to be an infrastructure investment of over $40,000 just to even bring them up to the ability to have FiOS. What I'm hearing here is that this infrastructure, this wireless across the city, or even just in phase 1, which is the downtown, wouldn't be able to offer the speeds of FiOS either. It'd be supplemental essentially. It's not an additional power strength or source. It's really more so for maybe just being on social media. It's really not intended to be workflow development or being able to sit down at a coffee shop and actually work off your computer and hop on Zoom calls or things. Well, Zoom would be fine because it's, to your point, it's not a download, it's an upload. So based off of that, that's kind of what I'm hearing, is that it would not compare to FiOS. It would not be up at those speeds, even if you were right directly underneath the actual tower or the device itself, right? Just to be clear.
Well, okay, so okay, I'll put my marketing hat on, right? We will be equal or better than FiOS at the end of the day.
Okay.
Right. I mean, that's if I were to say the theoretical maximum, even in our access points, it's 2.2 gigs of bandwidth at the end of the day for one access point. So yes, somebody can get that kind of speed as well. Absolutely.
All right, good to know. Are there any monthly data limits on this, or is this on open continuous?
This is open continuous.
Very good. So then speeds won't throttle, they won't shift at any given point in time. I think you talked earlier a little bit about with like partnering with school districts. Obviously, that'd be a different type of partnership, right? Where it turns on at night, shuts off during the day. But other than that, speeds won't throttle. It'd be consistent across the board.
That is correct. That is correct, right? So because we are looking at a fiber infrastructure from a backbone standpoint, whether or not that comes from Black Fiber or the city or however. Absolutely.
Okay. Good to know. I'm definitely leaning on the idea that these things would be camouflage, right? You try to be as conspicuous as possible and not too visible. So I like that when you brought that up. Thank you.
Sure.
I think that Councilmember Dutton or Mayor Pro Tem Dutton talked a little bit about the advertising. Who moderates that? Do you guys have your own internal? who dictates what kind of advertising is coming into our houses or into the home, stuff like that?
So we work with the city. You know, there's obviously a baseline, you know, from one, the type of advertising, the type of partners, but also even just personal content, right? We adhere to some of the strictest requirements in the world, right? So yes, absolutely. But we let the city know in advance. You know, these are, you know, the content providers, you know, and the city can actually say yay, nay as well to some of them. Absolutely.
Right, in the partnership model, perfect. So I'm assuming then the city itself and would be able to promote like community events through these this means as well of advertising at no cost. I'm assuming that's included in the partnership.
Yes, that is correct. As a matter of fact, it's something we sort of want to insist that the city participates because it increases usership and just visibility.
Okay. All right, good. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Keith, for answering these questions. If I have any others, I'll bring it up later. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Council Member Raymond Hamada, have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, Mr. Alexis, thank you for again getting on the call. Seems your you know, experience in the technology seems sound, and it seems like again your company has a lot of connections. Look at in the industry. You made reference to a small town in Texas, just as an example. I always also look in my immediate surrounding areas. Have you implemented this technology locally? Look at elsewhere.
Yes, town council member. We have implemented it locally. We're not allowed to say specifically as yet. They simply, because of NDAs, et cetera,
sure.
we will be able to. But yes, there are a couple of these that we have done locally, and we'll definitely be able to share those probably within the next couple of weeks during the contract process, because we'll go back and get approval from them to share their names.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I do respect that. Okay, my colleagues and staff again went through a bunch of my questions, but and that's good. And in regards to the financial aspects, and I know there was I know this is going to be at you know, at the end of the day it's going to be negotiated, but your slides made reference to a certain percentage at phase 4. Again, getting to a certain threshold of revenue, and that's where that I think 10% would kick in, and then after phase 5, 15 to 20%. What's the timing on those phases?
Mm-hmm. So each phase takes roughly between 10 and 15 at its longest stage. What we are planning on doing is actually running after we do the proof of concept, coming back to the city, and then looking at running each of those phases in tandem, in parallel. And so we're expecting to have the whole network ecosystem deployed within 12 to 15 months across the whole city.
Okay.
Okay.
One of your slides referenced the rollout period. Again, you numbered certain sections of the city, starting with the downtown at 1. What's the timing to get to, say, number 5?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And what we did, each phase, we looked at each phase, and so we felt each phase would take a certain amount of months. But the phases are not necessarily 1 through 6. We can actually do all the phases in parallel. And so we would actually, our goal is to get the whole city up and running as fast as possible. Because once we're up and running, then we're at maximum capability from a revenue standpoint. Each phase will typically take about 10 10 at the longest 15 months. So what we're planning on doing, once we get a positive, move forward from a contractual perspective, is doing the proof of concept, validating, because we firmly believe in trust but verify. And once we validate that with the city officials, we then say, okay, we want to go ahead and kick off all phases all at the same time and make sure that those deployments move forward. If for some reason we find, where the revenue is not there, or the ad revenue is not there, we have to tweak this. So then we move to more of a streamlined, okay, let's just do phase 2. Let's just do and tweak and see where we need to improve on things. Then we'll do phase 3. So that's part of the reason why that is broken down. Does that make sense, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can always see that it just doesn't happen all at once. So definitely. I know there was some questions about the hardware and the speed, and my question is in regards to signal disruption.
Mhm.
And do you use like line of sight technology? Does each piece of hardware have to, say on the downtown, have to connect so that they can see each other, so that the signal is not disrupted by trees or like other buildings? What's the technology there?
Absolutely. Great question to especially you threw in their line of sight, so I know you know a little bit more. So at the end of the day, what we do is you think of it sort of like an umbrella. We cover the city with this CBRS technology first. Then we're able to get, and CBRS, because it is in that cellular LTE kind of world, it's a little bit more forgiving from a line of sight. So it'll get past, one wall, maybe even 2 walls. So the CBRS gets us past some of the trees. It gets us to the level where of the top of the buildings with the ability to have a little bit higher speed. From there, we then connect into what we call as the Wi-Fi for the street level, where you have line of sight going down the boulevard. You don't have a lot of, it's below the tree line at the end of the day. And then obviously people, they don't have CBRS in their phones or their mobile devices, they have Wi-Fi. So that's the client side connectivity capability at the end of the day. So your average individual, as you mentioned, that's how they'll be connected. Connectivity within the home now, within the resident, will connect via that LTE router, because the LTE router, you now have a device, instead of relying on the personal mobile device of the user or that laptop or whatever, you're relying now on a higher powered physical device that's in the unit. So, if you have a quiet person trying to yell 100 feet, but a loud person yelling back, a lot of times you might hear the loud person, but the quiet person you may not hear, right? So your client device typically is that more quiet device. So we put a high-powered device plus a high-powered device on the outside, one on the inside, and then that high-powered device inside the unit communicates via Wi-Fi to the user. So that's how we end up overcoming some of the line of sight issues, the distance problems, by having 2 devices from a residential perspective to communicate.
I'm sorry. I lost my connection there for a bit. So
not a
something
problem.
disrupted me. Okay.
But-
I hope I think I got I got the gist of the
Okay.
response. Thank you. And that's a good lead to the personal hardware. So they get a quality piece of equipment, possibly inside their home or on their home, but they may not have the other personal equipment, the laptop or the phone. And you had mentioned, I believe, in part of your discussion, was that your company also actually, or you got other companies to donate certain equipment, such as maybe laptops.
Yes, that is. Yeah. So we will make an announcement close to the summertime with a very well named branded PC manufacturer that believes in what we're doing and wants to join us on this crusade. And the proposal there is that they would then be able to donate a small, two, not just one, but two small devices per resident in that home. So, you know, typically the student gets a device, but then also the home user gets a device, right? So they're not necessarily sharing or trying to share a physical device. And I'll be able to let everyone know who that is once we ink that agreement as well.
Okay, who sets the qualifications to, again, receive such hardware? So obviously there are lower income areas and will it be a blanket across the entire city, or is it obviously we're going to try to focus on those who need it, of course. Right. Any thoughts there, how that works?
So we are very motivated that it is blanket. Anyone on our network, these devices will be tied to our network. So at the end of the day, the goal is that anyone that has to be on our network gets a device, and that's the goal. And that's what we find is sort of, the most egalitarian way of doing this, so that, if you've gotten or received from the city, the ability to get a device in your home, you also have the ability to get two of these devices as well, but they are locked to the network. So, unfortunately, you have to think about things like, well, if somebody gets, you put 1,000 devices or 10,000 devices out there, all of a sudden they end up on eBay. And so we don't want that to happen. We want them to be actually used to contribute to bridging that divide. So we're thinking through those legal ramifications as well. You're absolutely correct. That's a good point.
All right. I think my last question here. Does your system ever experience any like overload? I'll just set the example of once it's implemented and again, everybody gets on it. Will businesses start disrupting, residential, receiving signals, or is
yeah.
I think you mentioned about the capacity, so you would then probably up your capacity, of course, to at least cover the expanded, subscriptions.
Yep. Yeah. So you're absolutely correct. We've made mistakes. We had a deployment in another country that was geared for 300 people, and the country underestimated the demand, and suddenly they had 1,800 people trying to connect on a very small network. And so we think that that's what's going to happen, that basically right now everyone is underestimating the demand for broadband. And so we try to engineer the system for 2 times what we're thinking, right? So right now we are estimating that if they're up to 20% of your population, so about 16,000 total residents initially that are looking to be on the system, we're engineering it for 32,000. And we still think that that's, when you look at it from a device perspective, not a resident perspective, because if you go on the 2 device per individual or 2.5, then that's a lot more, right? And so we're trying to design it that way. But one of the good things is, to your point, we do have the ability to add capacity. And because we're using different technologies, we're using CBRS, we're using Wi-Fi, we have the back end, we can shift people off and on different types. So shift them from Wi-Fi and offload them onto CBRS, side of the network, and those kinds of things to ensure that. We also have 9 different patents on how information can be brought into the system, where it doesn't drop information either. And so we're going to leverage all of those. But to your point, if there are definitely limitations. No one can deny that, and it's about how do we mitigate those and sort of have the relationships to add capacity as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you very much, Keith. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamada. Councilmember Sandy Santinez, questions of Keith?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Kit, for your presentation. And again, thanks to the staff for pursuing this issue. As you recall, the problem with digital divide was exacerbated by the pandemic. So I'm really glad that we are addressing this issue. Mr. Alexis, first question is, how many clients do you have that are cities or municipalities that are currently operational?
So globally, we actually have over 10 today, and those are in a variety of states. If we look at some of the smaller ones, you know, we are in negotiations as well with 30 different municipalities. And when we define the municipalities, these are, you know, 5,000 all the way up to about 300, 400,000. We do have some larger projects for like the Bronx and large city projects. We tend not to focus heavily on the big, really big, you know, NFL cities. Initially, we focus historically on more rural communities, bridging digital divide, sir.
Is one of those, let's say, similar in size to Bellflower?
Several, yes, several of them are similar in size. There's one that's about 60,000 from a community perspective, and then we have a couple of others that are a little bit bigger. Cobb County is one of the bigger ones with 500,000.
Yeah, of those, let's say 6 that are comparable to the Bellflower, what is your experience in terms of connectivity?
When you say experience in terms of connectivity, so
speed-wise,
yeah.
number of, let's say, are you getting the 15% threshold in terms of number of participants?
We're actually higher.
Higher than that.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, we never like to position ourselves as, you know, looking too good to be true at the end of the day. But what we're seeing, that the demand is so high that we are, because it's not just the community, right? It's the number of devices that get online. And so we may target and say we want to have, you know, like I was mentioning, 16,000 residents online, but in reality, the digital advertising world, they're not looking at that from the number of 16,000. They're looking at it that an average home in the United States actually may have anywhere from 3 to 5 digital devices. And those devices are really what's online and being monetized. And so in reality, they're looking at 50 to 60,000 devices at the end of the day that gets that monetization. So it's a little bit, it is a little bit different and very an aggressive way of which we look at things.
Well, I'm really glad that you have the experience already. So of those customers that are comparable to Bellflower, what is your average, let's say, what's your operating cost after you have fully implemented all those phases, the 5 phases?
So our operating cost isn't shared. And so it's as a privately held company, it's not something that we publish at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, when we can share things like, you know, our board members and our partner company details and overviews with you, definitely.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So let me rephrase the question. Are you generating enough ad revenues to cover your operating costs plus your initial investment?
Yeah, yes, we are. Yes, we are. We are very well funded company, including, you know, our board members are very well known, including one of the co-founders of Chipotle that sits on our board.
Okay, so there's no customer that is generating a red in terms of your revenue.
Oh no, yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah.
That's good to hear.
Maybe the U.S. military from sometimes.
Because I'm really into sustainability. I want to make sure that you're successful. If we actually get the contract here, I think I really want you to succeed. So
yes.
let me clarify one. I'm sure that this was asked a lot, a while ago. In terms, the only way to connect to the network is to this device that you will provide, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's not like an open network like Starbucks that anyone can access. As as long as you're within the range.
There you go.
So,
Yes.
so how do we, maybe this is a question to staff, who will qualify to get this device?
Mr. Santinez, initially because it'll be funded and we're looking at funding our portion of this with our CDBG COVID funds, we were looking at the low and moderate areas of the city as outlined by the CDBG map that you saw earlier, those blue areas, or people that can prove that they're within low and moderate income based on the HUD requirements. So those would be the people that would be eligible.
So we already have the target population.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Now, going back to Keith, you mentioned about the umbrella. Can you show that grid earlier that you showed earlier, where the city is divided into about 6 sectors?
Sure. Be more than happy. I'll need to get the sharing capability back again. There we go. There we go.
There you go. Okay, can you enlarge that? Can you enlarge that? No.
Sure. Let's.
So what does this mean? I think we're going to be okay here. So what does this mean? Let's look at number 4. Does it mean that this section here will not have access to the wireless network on the east side of grid number 4?
So what this means is that really, not that they wouldn't necessarily have access. It's more of a scheduling a tool for us to say, okay, here's how we think we can divide up, because we can't do everything at the same time. So we say, okay, number 1, we do the proof of concept, and then we think, okay, based on these different areas, we can, based on the signal patterns, we feel we can do these other areas afterwards. And so to your question, if we were to do these in order, yes, until we hit number 4, let's just say after 12 months, we then start off on section 4. And then after another, 5 or 6 months after we do number 4, we move to 5 and 6. And by the end of 24 months, we would have the whole city covered. But again, we can also, based on how things go, we may very well be able to do all of these sort of in parallel or overlapping. That's one area that is a little bit difficult to answer as far as when a specific area can be done. And we may seek the city council's opinions and say, okay, this is, how do you want it deployed? Are these sections correct? Because maybe they're not. Maybe do we have to deploy 2 last, or 5 first, or something of the sort as well?
Yeah, I understand that. But my question specifically is that area that is outside the red box, for example.
Yes.
If you look at number 4, there's a section that is beyond on the east side. It's outside the red box. So
yes.
will that be ever covered or not?
Oh yes, it will be. It will be. Yeah. These static lines, wireless signal doesn't adhere to these static lines. So, the goal is to cover the whole city. As a matter of fact, whoever your neighboring city is here, they'll see some of our signal as well, right? And same thing over here, they will also see some of the signal, because at the end of the day, wireless, there's no real walls or limitations from where the wireless signal goes.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad you clarified that, because I was kind of worried about this section here on the east side of number 4 and then the west side of number 1. This is a big area here that is not covered by your grid, so to speak.
Right.
Okay. So, but you're right. I mean, although our neighboring cities will have access to the wireless capability, but unless they have the device, they won't get it.
That is correct.
Okay, very good.
That is correct.
Okay,
that is
very good.
correct.
Thank you for showing that. Thank you.
Keith, could you clarify that if that's for the in-home devices, that would be the case, but if somebody's out on the street, like we have people come in regionally to the downtown to visit events, those people with their personal devices would still be able to access the signal. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. They would have to log on to. So what would happen is you would have, maybe with the permission of the city, we can call it something like, Bellflower City Wi-Fi or Bellflower Wi-Fi or whatever we want to call it. But someone, yes, would have the ability with their device there, maybe you've got a special event, but they would go to that specific website in the area, they would see the SSID, click on it, and then it would bring up a special login page, much like Steelcraft, right? That new lunch place. They would go in, get connected, and then when they leave, they would no longer be connected. If they came back to the city, they can then get reconnected again.
Okay, so it's kind of a mobile device, basically.
It could be a laptop, any kind of device that can get on a Wi-Fi signal at that point in time. Absolutely correct.
Yeah. Okay. And one final question on when you mentioned about ads, do your clients typically allow political ads?
Most of our clients basically allow the traditional ads that are allowed through what's called the big ad agencies and what's called DSPs, and so those get automatically piped in. So if there is no FCC or other regulatory limits on on a particular ad, it can very well allow those ads on the network.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I had.
Sonny, you plan on running some ads for your campaign next time?
No, because we got used to the last campaign because a couple of candidates were running ads,
No, I see that, but I know how your mind works. You're 2 years ahead of us, so. Thanks for your
All right.
comments.
Thank you.
Any other questions developed after this discussion of questions? Now's the time to say it. You all had an opportunity, but I know sometimes other questions come up.
Yeah, Mayor, I did.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dutton.
Yeah. So it sounds like, Keith, that the only completed city is that one in Texas, and the rest are all in contract stage, in building out stage.
No, we have other completed cities, but we have obviously a lot more in contract stage just because of the pandemic and the increased interest. But we do have some others. I just need to get them to give me the approval to let you know, give you
Right.
their names and things like that.
Okay, so my comment is there any completed cities in Southern California?
Yes, there is a completed city in Southern California.
Okay, I get what you're trying to be private or whatever, but that's good enough for me. That's a great answer to the question. Then also, does your system going to have anything to do with the 5G program that may be nationwide? It's supposed to be the fastest, greatest, and I get it, it's cellular, but cellular does a lot of data. And when you don't, and your cell phone doesn't pick up the Wi-Fi signal, it's always on the data.
Yep.
I assume these. I don't know the technology of both, but I mean, do you feel competition with 5G data if it comes into the area?
So you have to look at it as the technology we are using. What the FCC has done smartly so is that 5G, you look at it like a ruler, right? All wireless technology, you have 1 through whatever it is, right? And on the low side, there's a certain type of wireless technology. And as you move higher up, there's different kinds like Wi-Fi and others. In that 5G range, 5G takes up a huge swath of numbers, and all the way up to 300 gigahertz, all the way down, to 700 megahertz. And so what the FCC did was say, okay, we're going to take 3.5 gigahertz, but we're going to include it from the LTE, the cellular bands. It'll be cellular technology. And so it's actually included as something that can be complementary to 5G technology. And so as a result, rather than making it Wi-Fi or something, they made it part of that 5G huge band. And so by deploying CBRS today, we will be able to integrate in, and it all depends on the central core system. It will be able to migrate and transition signals over to 5G in the future as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it kind of does,
Okay.
because I can see it. I guess what you're saying, it can complement, 5G can complement you, and then your system can complement it back, because it's the whole system is moving the data.
That you're spot on.
Okay,
That's
that's
exactly
kind of what I
correct.
got from your answer. But yeah, I just knew that there had to be a way of using both at the same time. Thanks.
Yeah, and not to belabor things, I'll show you an interesting little image right here, right now, just so that I hope it makes sense. It's very well done. So you have these different technologies, excuse me, that have the ability to have multiple types of technology, but they've been built into a cellular umbrella, under a cellular umbrella, right? So you have the CBRS unlicensed, you have CBRS licensed, which utilities use, you have LTE, and you have 5G. And you also have 5G and what's a new one called Wi-Fi 6 or 11AX, which we also have 11AX, and that's what's going to be deployed. So you will have this technology, Wi-Fi 6, as well as this technology, CBRS, all of which that under this roaming capability, which includes 5G in the future as well. So you will be able to go from enterprise all the way over to carrier side of technology at the end of the day.
Thank you. That answers a lot. It kind of puts the puzzle together a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton.
Mr. Mayor, I have one more question.
All right, Mr. Sanchez, go forward.
Thank you, sir. Keith, in relation to troubleshooting, what's the typical response time? Let's say one of your main infrastructure or satellites goes down or what have you, or routers. What's that typical response time?
So there are two levels. Let's look at it from the standpoint of one. There's the user engagement. So we don't leave the user just because we give them a device or help them get a device. They have to get connected. So there's naturally the which is really where we care about, because the user is going to be probably the least familiar with technology. So there is obviously the technical support for the end user to call into. It's text, phone. There's an artificial intelligence, so literally it talks to them on text. A lot of people, 70% of our support calls actually come in via text today, and it gives them an automated answer immediately, right? From an infrastructure standpoint, the utility that we're working with that actually does the funding of the project will also deploy their 24/7 NOC team for replacements. They're the ones going to be doing actually the physical installation of all the equipment, and that's an important question, because the reason why we're using and partnering with these specific kinds of investors is because when they deploy, they're not using a marked up cost, right? Because they have a vested interest. So you're not getting sort of a bloated cost and so forth in the infrastructure as well. But that is when we look at it from a timing, we're looking at your typical 4-hour, 8-hour response time if something goes down. In our businesses, we deal with MDUs and also traditional enterprise. We do something called zero RMA, where spare parts are actually left on site. So no one's waiting for FedEx or UPS to show up. The tech goes on site. So if they're there within an hour, then the network is back up and running within an hour.
Okay, so it sounds like you have the infrastructure to manage those issues. All right, very good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Excellent questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes my question.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Anybody else develop any questions? I don't want to omit anyone.
Yeah, Mayor, this is Sunny. I have one more question.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Alexis, one more question. You're
So,
expecting, you're asking for a 5-year commitment from the city,
yes, sir.
and I hope that you succeed. Okay. So, is there any possibility? What will trigger you to abandon this program, short of 10 years?
Um, that's an excellent question, and it's a question that I think is based on the interest of yourselves, the city, and the involvement of the stakeholders. The reason why we come into this kind of conversation, and I apologize for my bluntness, but it isn't because of any other relationship except for the relationship that we've built with your economic development group, because they've been patient, they've been very explanatory, they've been, in understanding over the last couple of years. As they mentioned, in 2019 we went through the hoops to win in the first place, so we have had no business over the last 24 to 36 months, and we're still here. And so that kind of engagement to us is vital and important. And so if we were to lose that interest, suddenly now the city no longer wants to say, speak well of us because there's another shiny object that's out there. Or, we're no longer being supported at the Chamber of Commerce, or, those things are what drives down memberships. It drives down people on the network. So that lack of interest is probably turn us away and say, you know what, let's focus on areas where they do want to bridge that divide at the end of the day. And we will then go ahead and do that.
Well, it's a loaded response to my question, because we can, as a city, we can only control so much. We can only do what's expected of us and
Yes.
do more. But there's some other factors that you mentioned that are beyond your control nor the city's control, like, let's say, Chamber of Commerce, people using the network, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
That's something that we cannot control. We can influence it at some point in time through advertising, through promotion, and things like that. But one thing that I really want to do is, I'm a very optimistic person, but at the same time, I want to be realistic.
Yes.
Because I want to make sure that when we sign this contract with you, that you succeed, because we're in this together. If you succeed, we succeed too, and that will benefit our residents. But I'm trying to find factors that are beyond our control, that will basically force you to shut down the system, and what's going to be the impact on us and our residents.
Right, absolutely. So I think the I can't predict what that would be. Our commitment, short of me unfortunately disappearing one day for who knows what reason, our commitment is to sticking it out with the city. Just like you just said, with the city being committed. The only thing I could think of is let's just say one day someone comes in and for some reason, let's say somebody buys this, and their objective is different than our objective, and it changes the course of the company. In that instance, and this we have, it's one of the things that we propose, that if something happens to ICCN that significantly changes our positioning, we are willing to sign over the ownership of the network to the city. And so the ongoing commitment of the city now can continue just simply by bringing in another service provider. And what we do to mitigate those issues is that, so the marketing company that we are allied with, we allow them as part of the contract. So you will know, not just us, you will know who the marketing company is, who the signatories are, et cetera, so that if we disappear for some reason, you have the ability to bring in another GC that then runs the whole program on your behalf, and the program becomes survivable, even including regarding our existence at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. You actually answered my next question about the ownership of the equipment in the network. Okay, very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Sonny. I think we're all still thinking about our yellow bicycle rentals and how that was such a great program, and all of a sudden it evaporated. So I think we're all a little gun shy having gone through that. So, yeah. So, And I suppose there's a switch somewhere. You push the button or the switch and the whole system's gone. So those are the reasons for the questions. This question is for Jim. When I read the staff report, and I'll read what it says here, and I assume you wrote this. Received interest from a new stakeholder that is willing to fund all upfront costs for design, equipment, deployment, installation of the citywide wireless network in the city of Bellflower, while sharing the digital advertisement revenue with the city. So I came as a bit of a surprise that we were going to be asked to participate in the box. Did you understand that when you wrote this report, or is this kind of a mobile deal here? Tell me about that.
I'm sorry for the confusion, Mayor. The digital boxes in the low income households and was a kind of a secondary thought. That's a separate and apart, and I didn't clarify that well enough in the report. Was our thought. We had that idea as a way to help bring and bridge that wireless divide even more by helping out the low and moderate households in the community. The initial thoughts about this was just the rollout of the entire program, and those boxes would be available for people if they wanted to buy them for their homes. But then the light bulb at some point went off in our heads here in economic development, said, hey, we've got this COVID money that we're still struggling to spend, and we have a significant amount of time to spend it, and we have a significant amount still available. And we did some research and found that we could use this to help pay for some of those or all of those boxes, depending on how much money we have, for those low and moderate income families in the community. So that's kind of where that came up. It was a way to spend that money in a productive way. And I didn't mean it to sound like that was all of a sudden on us. So it was, we didn't word that well enough for you guys. That's what I'm trying to say.
What about businesses, Jim? Have you thought about the businesses community? Are we going to have to assist them as well? Or do you think most of those people are outfitted to go ahead and utilize this?
They may be outfitted to utilize this, but we could look at businesses also with the COVID money if they're located in those low and moderate income areas, because they serve low and moderate income people. Right. So we could also look at that as an option.
Yeah, the game plan is we don't know that there's that many people, but there are people in the community that will need to have the connectivity added to their current household appliances. But a lot of people in the community already have the ability to accept this with their current stuff, iPhones, et cetera, But like Jim said, this is one we sort of thought out, and the question keeps coming back to us: who are we trying to serve here? Who's going to be the beneficiary of this? And we keep coming with multiple groups. And then when we started talking about people who are less able to afford equipment, who are less able to buy the stuff necessary to access this, oh, well, that's going to be interesting. How do we get over that? That's when Jim thought of, well, we have this COVID money, which I think is a good thought. I think it's a creative thought, and I support that. So.
And broadband is a specific item listed under the use of the COVID funds.
Because I mean, I've come at this, and Jim will tell you, I've come at this sort of skeptically from the staff side, going, who's the real beneficiary of this? And I can't say I'm 100% certain, but I'm getting there. So yeah.
So I'm asking this to the city manager. So today we're not approving a contract because there's a lot of things that need to be discussed and discerned. We're looking for a motion at this point to allow the city manager to negotiate a contract, and that it will come back to the city council to be voted on at a date to be.
Yeah, the devil's always in the details. That's the reason I asked the questions I did in the beginning here, to help clarify the kinds of things I'm going to be asking coming in. So what we're looking for here is general direction to allow us to take the next step and start talking to these folks about an agreement. If there's a hiccup, if there's a need for an additional study session, we'll have that. If there's something we need to communicate that we haven't imparted yet, we'll do that as well. But if we can get to, in a business-like way, and take care of this without any really difficult issues, we're just looking for the ability to do that next.
So I believe you all understand the motion that we're looking for. Does someone want to go forward with that?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to direct the city manager to negotiate terms with ICCN.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilman Sonny Santinez, supported by Councilmember Victor Sanchez. Please poll the council.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Aye.
Councilmember Santinez.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Dutton.
Aye.
Councilmember Hamada,
Aye.
Mayor Coops,
Aye. All right, Mr. Stewart, 4B.
So this turned out to be a very productive discussion, and unfortunately, it ran too long. Ms. Preuss, who is going to make the next presentation regarding the micromanufacturing in town, has a COVID test she is pre-scheduled, and we certainly don't want her to miss that. So what we're asking today is that we table this item and reschedule it for a future date, and hopefully we'll have time to do it. I certainly don't regret any of the time spent today discussing the wireless issue. It was important, and we'll take up micromanufacturing in the near future.
So I guess we're at the end of our meeting. It's based on 4B is not going to be discussed. And so it is 11:45, and this meeting's adjourned.